Who is it?
Come on in. Come on in, the water's fine.
Pretty nice out there.
Pretty bare.
Where are my kids? You had them that when you got the suitcases, you had to check out where you put. I have them right up here.
What are you looking for?
My airplane, the tickets here.
Oh. It doesn't matter much.
Get you another pen.
Well, I have another set here, but he took and, when he needed to check out his luggage.
Yeah, he had.
Well, actually, yeah, you do want to use the same set, otherwise they'll charge point to point.
Right.
Well, I'm sure we've got him somewhere here. Did he have a jacket on?
Want to say hi?
Hi. I don't know what you want me to say. I'm standing in my kitchen and the dishwasher. I think we might need that.
Why don't you,
Can we get in your trunk?
What do you want me to say? Over.
No.
It must have been off the truck. Let's do it.
huh?
Well, do you like my candle?
Yeah.
It was hot in the truck.
You wanna show the pantry?
No.
Anybody care to see the pantry? No?
Are you waiting for an answer from somebody? Here, you want to see the pantry? Here. Here's a lovely pantry.
Mm.
Looking. Oh, he's lucky he is very big. I heard him drop a box there and something break. So far, this is what I'm talking about.
And this is Nina's bathroom. Got a vanity, a little bit of a short stool for her, but, and then the bathroom with a nice big and the guest bedroom. And Nina's room. Down the hallway. And there's the entry. And walk into our bedroom here. And outside our window. And and our bathroom. And the linen closet here. Another linen closet. And the walk-ins. let's see the walk-in closet. It's a big closet, huh?
Well, these I packed myself.
Oh,
I did some stuff myself.
It is nice to be here now, though. You have
Yeah.
to wait for it.
Blood. Boards for hurricanes.
I had all the very they did my coat, they want to bring my clothes. Yeah, before.
garden boxes.
Like,
That's what they did to Bernadette's too. She had a lot of clothes, not a lot.
I was going to, and I didn't know they had them. When he came with that, I was like, well, nuts, why didn't I give him all these other clothes?
Right.
Okay, that's no big deal. Hola. Where's Nina?
What was the name of your mover?
Greenville?
Grayville. Grayville movers.
They were excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, they're better than excellent even, actually.
Like I told Larry, that on Thursday when they didn't even pack this up until last Thursday.
I don't know where Nina
Came
went.
Tuesday.
23rd, yeah.
Yeah, they came.
Of course, you had a lot of it done.
Because I covered the story there.
And the backyard.
Yeah.
Then the
bad.
next, well, then they weren't gonna pick up till Saturday. But then Friday morning, I was sitting home and I was just gonna kick back because I had a rough day the day before. He called, I'm 70 miles outside of Tucson. You care if I pick up today? I'm like, no, I don't care. He's like,
Bend down there, here it comes.
I was like, not a word of complaint out of anybody. Both instances, they weren't told everything.
No.
And neither one, not a one of them, not a dirty look, nothing.
No bad remarks.
Part of the job, you know, big deal. They were just so nonchalant about it all. That was
Isn't
just,
that something?
oh.
I mean, usually you get some guy that says, oh, this wasn't in the program, or this wasn't in the order.
Yeah, they
Then
just,
they really give you static.
yeah, they didn't. They didn't get bent out of shape on anything. Like, oh, well.
That's right.
So, you don't have to take 40 days
This
or
is
40
really good.
nights.
No, no.
They get the idea. So,
Okay, this is where I work. 652 North Sam Houston Parkway East, also known as Beltway 8. No, you can't open that. You need this card. You gotta slide this card up.
I like that.
Take the ring down here.
You got stuff down here too, Larry.
Well, this is corporate training.
Did you go to corporate training?
No, I don't work for corporate training.
Is this one?
No. No, one way.
Are you booking us on the way back too, or just going out?
I'm gonna do that, but we're gonna discuss that. Are you coming back with us, or?
Yes. We're hoping to.
Well, they looking like boy getting out of Minneapolis.
Yeah. Say, that's gonna be the holiday weekend.
Get out of here. No, he's good. How's it looking for coming home?
You know, that's a holiday weekend. Is that gonna be bad?
Let's see here.
What is it?
1977.
On what day?
The 5th.
Oh, the 5th. Oh, good.
And that's what time?
1 o'clock. 11 o'clock.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And then we get on 1:45. That way we can make up. Hi. That way we can still make up our bed and everything.
There's Larry in his classroom. He's not teaching, but
What?
Now, do you have all these?
This is my team teacher here, Judy. This is why her and I are both the same.
I'll see.
And that's her two kids. Conroe, north of.
Oh, okay, they live here in Houston. I mean, they work here in Houston.
Yeah.
Okay, now, do you fill all these here computers?
Yeah.
Whoa.
you got all these things full?
Yeah.
This is the graduation room here. Bump into the door here.
This is the room that we use for graduation. We do, this is an 8-hour class in here on day of graduation.
That's a picture of
But
the
we break
airport
this down
then.
into tables of 4 each. Yeah, that's an airport that one of the employees had made for us.
That's neat, isn't it?
Yeah, the
Computer room for
right.
teaching.
Half and half.
Guess who this is? This guy here. That's Bruce. I don't know your last name, but I know it's Bruce.
We're doing a training module.
This is their lunchroom.
No, not right now. Maybe sometime in the future.
Now, where would you land in here? Is this
In
where?
Rome. We're Alexander flies.
Oh.
They fly over.
Machines they have for coffee and candy.
Went all the way back.
This is their break room.
So that's, get on!
Gotta do it. Go ahead, Marcia.
No.
Say all you want now. Now I got it on tape. On is fine. Okay, this is the Beaver Creek Church in Joyce, Iowa.
went to a couple of stake churches in Norway one time years ago.
Aren't they interesting?
Yes, we stood up, you know. Stand
Yeah,
up.
that's right.
Remember you're walking and having graces on each side of the stand.
They were arm
Just
wrestling.
kind of arm
It's arm
wrestling.
wrestling.
Yeah.
You know.
And then they had that little festival outside for the people with,
That's great. I remember they said something about that, they had the coffee bowl. They were
Yeah.
listening. They
Yeah.
opened it up.
yeah.
And
They
then.
got a head
and
church,
they
but
got-
they were off by themselves.
Yeah, and they got the communion passed through. That's what that was for the communion, that's right. Really? How many new people do you want?
Well, we're gonna,
Yeah, we did share, we had a couple, married couple, they moved down. And unfortunately, things didn't go well. And well, then this is Reverend Peter, Peter now stepped in, he had been on there for one time. And he stepped in and told the wife that they wanted to Michigan State, and he's talking about it. When he quits, I don't know, unless we can go into something, that's what we're doing.
I think all 3 years, we had
We did that, we had, well, we had Martin, no, we had 3 pastors, well, this couple, and then 2 others that we shared.
Now,
You're sure welcome.
we most likely will be doing the account.
I don't think we'll jump in on anything. We planned to come in on the Sunday night, but we didn't get our reservation on Monday, because we didn't know for sure if it was just for the family. We're in the area, be sure
Well,
to
see,
stop
that
and
may
see
be
us.
quick, because that's not very far from us. We had, this fellow that's from Beaver Creek, in this Beaver Creek, he was from church out there. And, he really makes his living as,
Oh,
speaks the Norwegian language fluently, you know. It's quite fun.
I know, me too.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I guess the person has to be thankful you can eat.
Right.
I remember when Dirk Suzanne was poorly, she couldn't eat, and I thought, boy, that was enough food, right? Come on, kids, we're gonna go over to the,
Hey, let's go.
oh, we're going out the side door? Well, you can go out the front if you want.
Yeah. Oh no.
Larry, Kevin knew where this graves were. And we
Well, look, is right here.
Uh-huh.
Here, his own.
And see, Bullock's daughter, Osa, is right there. Oh, is that so?
There was a big lot. Get a picture.
That's it. When I saw this genealogy, I had no idea.
Oh, no, I'm not related to them. No, I'm commissioned, I'm a sculptor commissioned to do this. But it is part of my heritage.
Okay.
Yeah.
very much. Is related to everyone else. And it gets very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I went from my grandmother up here to my great-grandmother.
Hi.
Hi. Where's Katrina?
I don't know.
Your dad wants a picture. Right there. Are you trying to? You should take some pictures of them reading like your dad.
Let's take another picture or not? You taking it? Now are you taking it?
Careful though, don't fall. Okay.
Tveit America Ebara en Ungdom. My name is Uncle Sam. I was born in 1776. I'm 218 years old. So you see, I'm just a youngster. The country is very young. And imorgon min geburtsdag. Tomorrow's my birthday. Hey, let's hear it for our country. We represent two wonderful countries here tonight that have a beautiful camaraderie between them. In fact, there are, I'm told, more Norwegians living in America than probably Norway. Evidently, the Norwegians got real frisky when they got over here because they had so much more time in Norway. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. And to the Norwegian friends and relatives, we want to say velkommen, 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 velkommen. Welcome, welcome. Let's hear it for our Norwegian. We're very proud to be part of the Norwegian heritage, especially this last year when the Olympic Games were in Norway. Now wherever we go, we can really raise our chest a little higher because Norway was such a wonderful host to the Olympic Games. Well, tonight we have many special treats for us. Everyone involved in the program is related in some respect. And so I'd like each of them, as they come up here, to share just what their relationship is with us. Tonight, the first numbers are going to be by the Lake Mills Community Chorus, and they can start coming out. And they're under the direction of Virginia Thomas. I'm going to let Virginia take the microphone at this time, and it's your program, Virginia.
Hjertelig velkommen til alle Nords besøkende innbyggere. Vi ønsker dere en god besøk her og videre. Heartfelt welcome to all Norwegian visitors in Lake Mills. We wish you a good visit here and elsewhere. And my relationship is, I am his granddaughter. My nephew is singing in the tenor section, and so that would be Knut's great-grandson. And so that's how we're hooked up. We've been checking it out. We want to thank you for asking us to sing for your wonderful celebration of our heritage. We will begin by singing a prayer that asks God to bless all the people who have come to this country yearning to breathe free. God bless America.
Free.
our soloist BJ Erwig will sing it in Norwegian. But first, Austria me Austria.
And I looked at them and I smiled, and they looked at me and laughed out loud. And I heard them say, I think that's that there Minnie Pearl. I think she's been around about 100 years. And I bet she always is carrying on like she's from the country. I bet she don't know a goose from a gander. And I looked at them and I said, well, down in Grinders, which we don't worry about that. We just throw them all out there together and let them figure it out for themselves. Oh, we got a lot going on down there in Grinders, which train runs once a week and the river runs every day. And, oh, the other night we had a party and all the fellers stood in a circle and the girl in the middle. And the fellers either kissed the girl or paid a fine. I made $2.65. Oh, and you know, the other night my feller, he came over and, oh, we went and sat on the settee in the parlor, just him by me and me by him. Oh, it was so romantical, except for one thing. We got a tall clock against the wall, and it ticks so slow, and it's just like it's saying, take your time, take your time. I want one of them fast tickety clocks that says, get together, get together, get together. Oh, and you know my feller, he didn't want me to come down to this big city of Lake Mills tonight. He just said, what if one of them fast city slickers would just run off with you? I wish they would. And then he said, what if one of them fast city slickers would just kiss you at the drop of a hat? And I said, I reckon I'd all the time be dropping my hat. Law, I ain't been kissed in so long. I don't know if you do it by sucking your breath in or blowing and all that. Oh, and then, so we had a lot of exciting going on last week. You know that Tom and Nancy Shimo? They got one of them newfangled oil stoves, and the thing blew up and blew Tom and Nancy clean out the roof. First time they've been out together since they got married. And then I saw that Dick Shimo tonight, and I said, oh, Dick, you're so thoughty to take your wife with you wherever you go. And he said, I'd rather take her with me than to kiss her goodbye. Have lots of fun now, you all. And now I want to introduce you to Ticklish Reuben. He's from down there in Arkansas. Ready.
Oh, my name is Ticklish Reuben. I came down from old Vermont. I've been tickled by almost everything. I've been tickled by a feather. I've been tickled by
was my grandmother, and Dennis Brosdahl is my father. And welcome to especially the Norwegian cousins and all the cousins from all over the United States. Oofda, that's a hard act to follow. Start off with a patriotic song. We're a nation born of courage, conceived in liberty, with a noble proposition of true equality. We're the promise of the future. We soar on eagle's wings. Freedom sings. Freedom sings. We are one great nation in the world, indivisible, with a spirit strong and free. We are one great nation. We're the land of liberty. Liberty. And grace, my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see.
Right offhand, I don't remember exactly how I'm related, so you'll have to trust me. Tonight before I left, we practiced a little bit, and I left a very important part of my violin at home.
So I have to make do with this. I don't normally use this, but tonight I will.
Is that correct? Okay. And he has the willow flute here tonight, and he's going to tell us a little story about it. And this comes right from Treungen.
Exactly. And as you know, your family is coming from Treungen, and that's in West Telemark. That's in the middle of South Norway, pretty far from the coast. So the influence and the impact from the more rural areas, or the more urban areas, I should say, has not been too heavy. So if you are interested really in tradition, you should really go and visit West Telemark and see how nice it can be, especially when we are talking about architecture, like also wood carving, rosemaling, and other kinds of craft, lefse baking, and also music. And one instrument that really is very simple in a way, you will maybe say primitive, is the so-called willow flute. The willow flute is made from, as I said, a willow tree, the bark of the willow tree, and especially the spring, or in fact only in the spring, the bark is slippery, so it's possible to get it off the tree. So you can make a cylinder. So this is just only a cylinder where you can blow in one end and get the sound out from the other. So no holes, in other words, like modern flutes, modern flute. I will play two songs for you, or two tunes. First, so-called Halling. That's a West Telemark dance that use just a specific scale, which I will explain a little in a moment, is used. That's it. When I'm blowing through this cylinder, I only get to try it, like, in other words, like bugle horns and things like that you have heard in the military, I guess, in the army. But if I cover the end of it. Then I can get some tones in between. So I make a kind of a very special scale. It's not a major nor a minor. It sounds like that. Let's see now. I have to adjust it a little. Let's make kind of a very special flavor of the Norwegian folk music. And this flute has really been used for hundreds of years. We don't know how long time. And the impact on other kinds of vocal and instrumental folk music can be very, really heavy. So I will end my little presentation with playing so-called springer, or you will maybe see a spring dance. That's a very special dance, also from the West Telemark area. And beside that special scale, which is used, is also something special with the rhythm, because it has fit to the dance. It's not a straight waltz, it's in 3/4, but the beats are not even, as you will hear. Always a hassle to adjust it.
1 week out of high school. I've worked on the Tveit family history, Tveit, Tveit, Tweed, whatever name you want to call it. I've found 2 more, by the way, in the last 2 weeks. One is T-W-E-E-T, and one is T-W-E-D-T. But most of those people live in northern Minnesota and Montana, so far that I've found. Anyway, I wanted to tell you I've been working on this family history since about 1965. That's 29 years. I didn't really get busy until 1972. And I thought I should tell you, I started with my mother's side of the family, because when my great-grandmother, and her name was Mary Nelson Hall, died in 1965, she had 7 children, 22 grandchildren, and 95 great-grandchildren. And everyone came to the funeral. Needless to say, we filled the entire church, the basement, and many people were standing outside. It was just a small country church like the Beaver Creek Church. And I like to organize things, so I just started writing down groups of families. And, well, one thing led to another, and it got bigger and bigger. And my dad's parents realized that I had this interest. So my grandfather handed me a 3-page family history of his family. Well, this is what it's grown into. You're all part of my family now, whether you want it to be or not. And my grandmother was German, and I work on the German side too. So I'm not a pure-blood Norwegian, but I'm close enough. Anyway, I brought you all here so we could have a little fun, and I could give you some information on your family, because most of you don't know a lot about your own family. You know about your immediate family, your grandparents, but you don't know. In the meantime, you're going to hear from Arne Rosenvold. He's one of our relatives from Norway, and he's going to talk to you about the immigration from Norway. Arne?
Dear friends and relatives, I am, as Kevin said, Arne Rosenvold. I'm son of Gunhild Tveit, who was born at the central farm Søgard in 1911. I'll try to tell you something about about the members of the Tveit family who emigrated some 150 years ago. What society did they leave, and what were the reasons why they left the old world to settle in the new? Some history first. Norway had for more than 400 years been united with Denmark and ruled from distant Copenhagen when the bonds were severed at Eidsvoll in May 1814. Some 900 inhabitants lived mostly in rural areas. A few cities were small. Bergen was the greatest of them, with a population of 17,000 inhabitants. Oslo had a little more than 10,000. The Norwegian society consisted of clearly separated classes. The most important was the upper class, the conditioned, consisting of civil servants who had the political initiative, the great merchants and the wealthy landowners and farmers who had the economic power. About 50% of all Norwegians were middle class, farmers, craftsmen, minor merchants, and the rest formed a lower class of servants, day laborers, crafters, and others of the same kind. It was a poor country. It can't be denied that Norway was economically an underdeveloped region at the beginning of the 19th century, perhaps the poorest in Europe as a whole. Before the historic year 1814, Norway and Denmark had been suffering from the Napoleonic Wars. The King of Denmark had chosen the wrong side when he decided to join Napoleon in his struggle to control the European continent. And from 1807 to 1814, the country's economic life became paralyzed. Shortages of grain and other food created a great crisis and hard times. During the summers of 1812 and 13, the harvests failed, and a lot of people starved to death. And with the peace after the Napoleonic Wars, the recession came, knocking out the great merchants who had made their fortune on their merchant fleets and especially on their export of lumber to Great Britain, France and the Netherlands. As most of you know, Norway left the Union with Denmark in 1814 and formed a constitution at Eidsvoll, signed by the 112 representatives on the 17th of May. Norwegians are proud of knowing that this constitution was the freest in Europe at that time. And mind you, it was built on the ideas from the American Declaration of Independence in 1776 and on the French Constitution from 1791 from the revolutionary days. The Constitution put an end to royal absolutism and instituted a liberal constitutional rule. It provided for a greater participation by the people. No women were allowed to take part in political life, but ordinary farmers were eligible to the Storting or parliament, and from 1837 also to the local political bodies that were established. After some months of independence and optimism, Norway entered into a union with Sweden on November the 4th. This time as an independent kingdom. And we kept our Grundlov, our constitution of the 17th of May, almost unchanged. But the civil servants, in cooperation with the king, kept on ruling the society for the next 70 years. And as we shall see later, I think this is one of the reasons why people with political ambitions gave up their struggle and left the country to start afresh under freer conditions in America. Nevertheless, a new era had begun. People set out to discover what Norway was really like, and the wave of nationalism which started under the Napoleonic Wars in Europe also swept Norwegian shores. The Norwegian culture was studied, the fairy tales were written down, so were the old ballads from the Middle Ages, as well as old folk music. Most of these treasures were found in Telemark. Norwegian authors like Bjørnson and Ibsen used figures from Norwegian history and the countryside in their books and plays, and Grieg composed the music. Towards the middle of the century, changes in the economic life became evident. A spirit of change and transformation, new influences and ideas affected old customs and traditional way of life. But on the whole, a barter economy in which almost all consumer goods were produced in each individual farm continued. But the Industrial Revolution was on its way, the cities were growing, and urban industries were increasing. At the same time, the old peasant society was slowly dissolving, weakened by the impact of the cities, new consumer goods, and expanding money reform brought about by financial self-interest and influenced by economical liberalism. And the bonds to the established church were weakened as well. The pietistic lay movement that came out of the Hauge revival indicated a general resistance to the authorities. As I mentioned previously, most Norwegians lived in rural surroundings, and so did your forefathers. The most important feature of the inland, bygd or township was its isolation. Coastal and fjord districts had ties by water with the rest of the world, but in the heavily forested, mountainous areas of Norway, like Telemark for instance, each valley or district had remained a separate unit for centuries. Variations in dialect, costume, traditional foods, and customs gave evidence that medieval seclusion here survived far into modern times. Even in the narrow valleys, separate small farms lay side by side, each with its own buildings. The individual identification was with the family and its native homestead, where generation after generation had lived and died. The population increased heavily in the 19th century and pushed settlement further and further up the mountainsides and into the forests, filling in between the old farms and extending their limits wherever arable soil could be found. This fact creates another reason why people left. No more farmland was to be found. Life on the farms of each bygd or grend, as we call it in Norwegian, was to a large extent self-sufficient too. Each homestead not only produced much of its own food or clothing, but also supplied many of its other needs. The farmers took their building materials and fuel from their own woods, made their own wooden furniture and implements, forged their own tools from crude iron, and cured their leather. Local craftsmen and women made leather shoes or tailor garments for the family from local materials, or baked a half-year's supply of hard bread, or flatbrød, as we call it in Norwegian. Within such bygder or hamlets or rural districts, each farm unit maintained its social separateness. Few families lived so far from neighbors that they could not see another house, or at least the smoke from a chimney. In so close a community, all knew everyone, knew their past and present and possessions, but they met regularly nowhere but at church. In addition, they met at Christmas and midsummer, or at important family events, marriage, baptism, confirmation, burial. In remote areas, the minister might be in charge of 3 or 4 churches, and therefore he was not able to hold services more than perhaps once a month. The social structure in a bygd was the same everywhere in the rural districts. The state-appointed Lutheran minister was the #1 in his district. He lived on a farm, assigned to him as a part of his salary. But he had hired men to do the work at the farm. He was the most important government official, keeping vital statistics for his parish, performing the ceremonies of family life, reading official proclamations after service. He or his clerk was in charge of the local school because the church was responsible that the members of the parish knew their catechism and the 10 Commandments and could read the Bible a little. The confirmation was a final test, and if you passed this sort of exam, you were regarded as a real adult person with all rights and duties. The second in command was the sheriff, or lensmannen. He was usually one of the biggest landholders in the area, but he was also, I regret to tell you, one of the least popular, since he collected taxes and carried out forced seizures and sales. A visit from the sheriff on such an errand was sometimes the final trial which forced a hard-pressed family to emigrate. Presten or lensmannen, the minister and the sheriff, were the great men of each isolated community to be greeted with bows and uncovered heads. The greatest farmers in the community were ranked next to the official class, which also could include military officers. Their families had often held the same farmsteads for centuries, and their traditions and loyalties were bound to these and their native valley. They owned farmland, forests, mountain pastures, and fishing rights. Some freeholders stood below them and owned tiny plots. These were forced into other economic activity, especially during the long winter, fishing or forestry, sometimes handicrafts. Still lower in the social scale came husmen, the crofters, landless men who had traded their labor for the right to put up a hut and clear a little farmland of somebody else's soil for cultivation. They generally had to work a stipulated number of days a week for the landlord. They cultivated their crops the way they thought best in the little time left. At the bottom of the rural community were the servants and laborers who hired out for a year for a small amount of cash, a few articles of clothing, and for free lodging. Practically, the only local employment available to sons and daughters of crofters and small farmers was service on a larger farm. It's obvious that for crofters and for servants and land laborers, an America with opportunities for all must be the promised land. And if they could produce the money, they're left by the scores. Norwegian immigration began on July the 4th, mind you, 1825, when the sailing of the sloop Restoration from Stavanger to New York took place, and the sailing ship reached the port on October the 9th. On board were 52 persons in the beginning and 53 when they finished their voyage. These first emigrants came from southwest Norway and settled at first at Kendal Township on the shores of Lake Ontario. Later they moved on to Fox River Valley in Illinois. But these pioneers were not followed by great waves of more emigrants from Norway. Regular emigration started in 1836. It's interesting to be able to point out that emigrants from Telemark were real pioneers. The first decade from 1836 to 45, almost 70% of those who set course for the New World came from Telemark. The first 40 years, from 1825 to 65, 80,000 people emigrated to America. After the Civil War, the great exodus began, and during the next 50 years, almost 700,000 Norwegians took part in overseas crossing. The peak years were the late 60s and the 14 years from 1880 to 1894. On the average, 18,900 Norwegians left annually, or 10 out of every 1,000 inhabitants. It culminated in 1882 with more than 28,000 Norwegians traveling to America, a number that exceeded the natural population increase that year. But where was America? How did they know of the promised land? The arrival of news about America was an important factor in starting immigration from the districts. This news often supplied the final incentive to leave. When emigrants returned for a visit, they told about the opportunities over there. But far more important were the America letters. Letters that Norwegians wrote home to family and friends in Norway. These letters created a positive picture of the new land. They told about freedom and equality. If you are known to be a decent and honest man, you will be as much respected as the other, farmers and craftsmen, just as much as merchants and officials, the letters would tell. The letters also gave advice and guidance to people who had in mind to come to America. And so the letters were copied and sent from farm to farm, and many of them were printed in newspapers. And then we have the America books. The first guidebook was the true account of America for the enlightenment and benefit of the peasant and the common man. It described the country, explained its institutions, and gave practical advice about the journey and the adjustment to American life. The author's conclusion was, "From everything I have seen so far, the industrious farmer or craftsman as well as the respectable merchant will soon acquire a sufficient income in America." Another well-known guidebook was Pathfinder for Norwegian Immigrants to the United States and Texas. Some emigrants were informed by agents from steamship companies or land or labor companies. I have given you some reasons why they left, and here are some more. Struggle against want, poverty and hardship, and a desire to escape political and religious constraints and class prejudice were among the most important reasons for immigration. The emigrants hoped for social betterment. This hope could mean different things to different people. Into it were woven strands of religious dissent, escape from personal problems, adventure, a dream of political freedom, but economic advantage counted for most. To the first Norwegian immigrants, this was synonymous with the ownership of land, the only basis of social prestige which they thoroughly understood. Ideals of liberty and equality had undermined the old religious duty to be content with the lot one was born to. But the distribution of privilege, resources and esteem was still determined by birth, and the number of inhabitants increased significantly in the 19th century thanks to better health conditions, vaccination and more and better food. But the potatoes saved many lives. But the opportunities to cultivate more farmland lacked because most of the tillable soil was already in use, and the industrial society had not made its impact on Norway. In the middle of the century, the first factories grew up in Christiania, but jobs in the towns were scarce. And when the big mills and factories started their production, most people in the vicinity of a city sought employment in an urban environment. For people in a remote mountain community or in a distant fjord area, the city seemed far away and dangerous, so they left to be farmers on the prairies instead. Small farmers and sons of independent farmers constituted a large emigrant group to which the Tveit immigrants belonged. But also lower social groups in the country, people from the crofter class and agricultural laborers were well represented among the immigrants, especially after the 1850s. New as early as in 1837 was how unevenly it affected various districts as it moved like a dangerous disease from the coasts to remote mountain valleys or, for instance, Telemark. The spread of this fever could in some cases
der man brød, og løs på tvungne lenker. så at du ei må tenke for deg og dine nådebrød med tid og tål en stunde nød. Opplysningssolen vil skinne frem, og du har seier vunnet. Opplysningssolen vil skinne frem, og du har seier vunnet.
Between the old world and the new. It proves, in a way, that blood is thicker than water. This reunion must not be the one-time happening, but the first, or rather the second step, to a more thorough relationship between us and you. Thank you. We will now hear another example of the America songs, or emigrant songs. So, Sigvald, Johan, and the violinist, please step forward.
Tveit will now talk about the Tveit farms at Treungen in Telemark, Norway. And for those of you that haven't figured it out yet, the Tveit farms, and there were several, were at the little village or near the village of Treungen in the parish of Nissedal, which is like a county, in the Norwegian state, I guess, of Telemark. And that's in the bottom of Norway in the middle. Knut?
the second half of the 19th century, because it was in that period that the immigrants left the hamlet. And where is Tveit? Kevin has just told it, but I should like to show it to you. If I can find it. Yes, it is. Treungen is in, okay, can you see it at the bottom? In Nissedal municipality, in the southern part of Norway. As you may know, Norway is a country at the edge of Europe, just under the North Pole, somewhere. And you may see that Norway and I has approximately the same figure, you may see there. Okay, then we go to this parish, Treungen. I have a map of it here. Do anybody of you remember the boat trip at Nissedal last summer? Good. This is the southern end of that lake, Nissedal. And here is the hamlet Tveit. Treungen originally had 4 main hamlets: Årak, Tveit, Holme Överland, and Heimdal. Maybe you should come and help me, fellow. You offered my help, and maybe I should. Could you please? There we go. Hello. Oh, yes, left. Okay, I'll try to do my best. This is a map of Tveit. Here we have the farm Oppistad, Oppigard, Norgar, Sögar, there we go. Tell is attending a teacher college, so this is some sort of educational practice. And, okay, we'll work together. Okay, these 7 farms: Oppistad, Oppigard, Norgar, Sögar, Uttistad, Jore, and Ekrøne. Okay, put it under there. And I have a teamwork with Philip Ramsey up there. Could you? Okay, I put off this and. This is the Norgar farm. This is the Jore farm. This is Oppistad farm. How do I do this? Is it possible? Oh, good. Good. This is Uttistad farm. This is Sögar farm, where I was born 100 years ago. Yes, I was born there too, some later. And this is Ekrøne. And maybe that's all. Yes, that's all. Included in these 7 farms, there were 3 cotter allotments. A cotter, or a cottager, or something like that, is a man living with his family in a cottage on a farm, obliged to work on that farm for a certain number of days a year.
One example for a cotter Tveit, he had a duty to work 3 weeks on the main farm, and his children had to herd cattle for 3.5 weeks. I'll show you the cotter allotment named Apperåsen. That's picture number 8, if you please. Oh, yes, you must trust me. That's Apperåsen. Okay. And my text says that the view is beautiful. Let's try. Yes, that's the that's the farmer of Uppistog today, Tveit, and he points at the cornerstone of the house building in the cotter allotment in Apperåsen. Old people on Tveit today still remembers the barns in Åsen, but the house building was moved to Tveitson and it still exists there. In the 1920s, the barn was moved from Apperåsen to Uppigard. Could we try picture number 10? Is that available on the... Yes, good. You see at the left of the barn, that has been linked to the Uppigard barn, and that came from the Apperåsen. Lower Åsen, this cotter allotment belonged to Utistog. And some years ago, the owner of Utistog today, Olav Tveit, found remnants of the brick wall. Could I have a picture number 11? Yes? Can anybody see Olav Tveit there? He points at the brick walls of the remnants of Lower Åsen cotter allotment. Olav's grandmother, Ingeborg Lia, born in Utistog 96 years ago. Picture number 12. She recently told me that she still remembers when the house building of Lower Åsen was torn down. So it must have been around 1905. She don't remember the barn. And Lower Åsen had a beautiful view too. Let's try picture number 11. Is it? Yes, it's beautiful. I can assure you that. I have some word to say to my photographer when I go back to Norway. Tveit had a third cotter allotment, that was Huskleiv, that was part of the Uppigard farm. And shall we try picture number 14? It was situated at this little meadow. And this picture is in the eastern direction. Let's try a picture in the western direction, number 15. That's You see, I do not owe any slides, so I could try it before, but you must use your imagination. Okay. Number 4. Here are the emigrants from the Tveit farms. Emigration into America made an end to the cotter system at Tveit. I have, I think, 145 persons emigrated from Tveit in the period from 1850 up to 1950. Maybe we have descendants from Åsen and Huskleiv here today. Do anybody of you know your ancestors in Åsen? Okay. I know you are. It's the history of these 7 farms during the main emigration period 1850 to 1900 I now will concentrate on. First, about the age of Tveit hamlet. How old Tveit is, we do not know. The oldest written sources go back as far as 1395. These sources concern the Tveit church, and consequently the farms must be older than 1395. The church was built on Sögar's ground, so maybe Sögar is the oldest farm, if not the oldest. Number 16. This is a drawing of the last church at Tveit, torn down in the 1860s. And this, number 17, is the oldest picture we have of Sögar. And probably this is the oldest farm at Tveit. Let's look at the development of the hamlet from 1 to 7 farms. Okay. Most probably Tveit was originally 1 farm, the farm number 33. And even today all the Tveit farms have the same farm number, 33. We do not know when this farm was split, but there can be little doubt that Tveit for quite a while consisted of 2 smaller farms, Tveit North and Tveit South. Ancient remains clearly indicate this. The organizing of the fishing and hunting rights and the summer farms are all linked to Tveit North and to Tveit South, even today. And 2 of the farms have North and South in their names even today. Nordar, that's the northern farm, and Sögar is the southern farm. So maybe these 2 farms are the oldest at Tveit. We do not know when these 2 farms were split even more. Into 2 smaller farms, but most probably it took place prior to the 17th century. We know for sure that at the end of the 17th century, Tveit consisted of 4 farms, 2 Tveit North and 2 Tveit South. And later, these farms were even split once more. And we know when, why and how 3 of these farms were split even once more. Roughly speaking, it happened during the first half of the 19th century. And for economical reasons. You see, Ekrene is the only farm who has not been split. So this farm is twice as big as the others. So since 1840, the main hamlet of Tveit have had 7 farms. So now we have to look closer at these farms. And I'll concentrate on 2 factors, economic and cultural conditions. How many acres? During the reunion in Treungen last summer, many Americans asked me how many acres. They were very interested in the acreage of the farms. I didn't know, because the acreage is of less importance in Norway than in America. Because most of it is unproductive, it's mountains, swamps, etc. But today I have clearly prepared my lesson as usual. we have exact figures of cultivated and pasturable area in 1864 and approximate figures of the total area. The average acreage in 1864 was 3 acres of cultivated area, and approximately the same acreage of pasturable acreage, and about 11 to 1200 acres of total area. How was it possible to make a living of 3 acres of cultivated area and 3 acres of pasturable areas? An answer to that question is very simple. They couldn't make a living of this. And since not all the Tveit farmers went to America, they must have another sources of income. And in fact they had. But first, a word or two about the cultivated ground. Do well. The cultivated ground was used to grow grain and potatoes and some hay for the horses. The cows and the sheep had to survive on hay from the woods. So what do you think about the soil at Tveit? Was it fertile? You seed 1 barrel of barley corn and you harvest 10. In Norwegian we call it tenfold. Out of 1 potato you receive 7 in return. And by the way, the farmers at Tveit today claims 12 to 14 folds of potatoes and even more. What about Iowa? I had a sightseeing yesterday or the other day, and I couldn't see 1 potato in the whole area. And I'm sure that the farmers at Tveit grew more potatoes in 1864 than Iowa today. Then we have a look at the farm animals. And this is in 1864. There were no tractors, but all the farms had 1 horse, 3 to 4 cows, and a dozen sheep. And a century later, you will notice that all the farms had 1 horse, 3 to 4 cows, and 8 sheep on average, because 2 of the farms had no sheep. And other animals scarcely existed at this time. Pigs, for example, were quite extraordinary, not only in Treungen, but I think in Norway as a whole. But earlier in the 19th century, some farms had goats. The first fowls appear around the year 1900. From where did the Tveit farms get the food for their animals? And particularly for the most important farm animals, the cows. Okay, Philip, you show this beautiful cow. No. Sorry. There it is. This is a Telemark cow from 1870 with the impressive name, the Pride of Telemark. So if you have a girl and you don't know what to name her, maybe you could call her the Pride of Telemark. And where What did a beauty like this and her cow friends have their food? I think this table, I think it's the most interesting I did in preparing this lesson. You see that about 70% of all the hay were cut in the woods. It was more hay outside the cultivated area. So most of the working days during the season of hay cutting were spent in the woods. This was meadowland, and as I said, the hay from the meadowland and pasturable land was mainly for the horses because they had to work hard. But this hay, about 19,000 pounds, were cut in the woods. And not seldom the farmers were cutting more hay until frosty weather arrived. My grandfather, Ola Tveit, tells that one autumn he was cutting more hay for 7 weeks. And then we have a picture. I was promised 2 things like that, but it didn't work, so we have to do it in this way. Can you see something? It's the Heimdal farm cutting hay at moor. Most usually 2 men were cutting the grass and 1 woman was handling it, raking it, making it dry, collect it, and so on. And the next picture, that's the Uppigard family, lunchtime during the wood hay cutting in the early 1930s. Some farmers in Norway preserved more hay in forest barns, but the Tveit farms had no such barns. The hay was therefore preserved in open air, firmly piled to a hay rick or a so-called stack. That's Norwegian for skirt. Could we have picture 21? Yes. The lady in there, she is piling a hay stack. It was complicated to make a haystack in a way that the hay couldn't be damaged by rain and snow during the autumn and winter until it was needed. My uncle Ola Tveit, and he is present in this audience today, made his first stack in 1933. He made 5 stacks in 1 week. And I refer to him for further details of stack making. I remember a very dear neighbor of me, Kevin Tvedt, in the farm of Nissedal. He was convinced that the time of hay cutting in the woods, it would come back. And he wanted to summer the system of so-called spring cow stables. I have tried to make cow stables outside this area, the so-called spring cow stables. It was not before 1913 that each farm at Tveit had its ground just around the buildings. Before that time, the grounds were spread all over the hamlet. We do not know for sure. It could be a picture from another direction of Eklunestad, but maybe this is Uppigard Sögarstad. Before we leave the area of Hawksted and Fjellstad, I would like to show you another beautiful small lake, the Elvedals Lake. And my grandfather, Kevin Tvedt, was very close to shoot a bear at Elvedalen, but because of fog, the bear escaped. As you may have seen, the woods were very important for the Tveit farmers. It offered pasture from early spring to late autumn, and it provided the farmers with hay supply for the rest of the year. And the wood gave food for the people. Moose, wood grouse, black grouse, and white grouse, fish lacking intelligence, but because of your ancestors were neglecting school. But nevertheless, the Tveit children were more eager to go to school than all of the pupils in Treungen, because they met only at 12% of the time. This means, in Treungen as a whole, that only 1 to 2 pupils out of 10 met at school daily. Somebody had to help them and had to sign a document. This I'm very proud of. This is signature of male farmers in 1861. And we see that Ole Johnsen Tvedt in Norge, he could write his name. Halvor Olsen Tvedt i Jordet. Ellef Olsen Tvedt. Torkjell Halvorsen, Egil Ormsen, and Sven Gunnufsen. The only man who could not write his own name in 1861 was Gullaug Ormsen in Uppestad.